Professor X as Juggernaut. In What If number 13, the question is posed, what if Professor X had become the Juggernaut? And the answer is, it would make Ben Ball feel uncomfortable. This mashup is maybe a little tough to justify for this list since it's about superheroes, and in this story Professor X, or not, does enlist all of the mutants to take over the world, but it's still Professor X in there somewhere, and it's arguable that he may have been turned from good to evil by the influence of the Sidorak gem. I just had to put this strange character on the list because I think it's such a weird combination to even consider, let alone craft a whole issue around. Look at him. Chonky, fully mobile Professor X. When he puts the helmet on, things are less weird though, but it's still one for the list.
Number 9. Wolverwimp. Wolverwimp is an alternate version of Wolverine who, instead of having an adamantium skeleton, has a styrofoam one. He appears in one of the joke covers included in issue 100 of What If. This poor version of Wolverine is threatened by a little girl who is a female child version of Magneto. Yeah, it's weird. While Wolverine is fearsome and tends to fight for what he believes in no matter the odds, it seems that Wolverwimp is all too ready to shy away from a fight as he's terrified of a conflict. Honestly, I really can't blame the poor guy. He is a styrofoam skeleton, so yeah. I don't even know how you'd walk around with that, never mind trying to be a hero and like stand up to bad guys. Probably just like crumple over.
Frog Thor, or Throg. There's not much more to it than that. The question posed in this issue is, what if the X-Men had stayed in Asgard? It really has nothing to do with Frog Thor, but he makes an epic appearance nonetheless. The transformation actually takes place in Thor number 363 and is revisited in this What If issue. If you don't already know, or couldn't already have guessed, Thor's slimy amphibian form comes at the hands of his brother Loki. What makes this moment great in What If number 12 though is that Storm is forced to face off against Frog Thor, with the stakes being the prosperity of all of Asgard. Luckily, she wins the fight and Frog Thor is turned back into regular Thor. Although, is that really a win? I liked Frog Thor. If you want to see more of Throg, you can catch him in another storyline as well, where a shard of Thor's hammer is actually picked up by a frog, turning it into a pretty powerful little dude. I just thought that was worth mentioning as well. Frog Thor.
Number 7. What if Professor X had become the Juggernaut? In this reality, Professor X is the one who becomes Juggernaut and gets buried. Now this causes him to go down a completely different path when it comes down to the X-Men, because after this, he never ended up creating the X-Men because he was stuck. So now the Fantastic Four wants to defeat Magneto instead. So Professor X, he's still listening. He's using his mind powers. He's knowing what's going on out there. He's kind of getting pissed that he's not able to go out and help. So he digs his way out, and his telepathy powers are now stronger than ever with his new Juggernaut super strength. So he takes over the country with his own X-Men posse to enforce these anti-human laws. So Cyclops even sided with Magneto at this point because he could block Xavier's telepathy. So they're battling it out on Asteroid M, and Cyclops is trying to remind Xavier about his original dream, you know, with humans and mutants living together in harmony. And before he could really consider it, the ground beneath him exploded and he got launched into space, probably forever, and man, that's gotta be boring. Imagine not dying in space. That sounds like an absolute nightmare. This should be number 1 maybe, I don't know.
Thanos Captain America. In What If Infinity Thanos, the question is posed, what if Thanos joined the Avengers? And the result is this really strange depiction of Thanos wearing a Captain America suit. What goes on in this storyline is that Thanos joins up with the Avengers to fight the Builders, and he doesn't even try to take over the world or try and kill half the population or anything like that. That is until Captain America is killed and Thanos takes over for him. Because then he decides it's time to start taking over stuff again. After he helps the Avengers destroy the Builders with a swift battle, he goes back to his classic Thanos self and makes it his duty to take on Cap's old position as leader. And then quickly makes it his duty as well to lead the Avengers and the rest of the heroes of Earth into war with the rest of the universe. So yeah, he doesn't take over Earth, but he seems to be ready to help them take over other worlds alongside him. Fair compromise? I guess so. Either way, the cover of this issue just feels so weird, and I felt that Captain America Thanos needed to make an appearance on this list.
Number 5. What if the Avengers had never been? Now, with all of these multiverse stories beginning in the MCU, it feels like the Avengers have never been further apart. It's exciting, but also a little concerning. This What If was actually the first What If issue with a major death, just 3 issues in. They're going for it. So we start off with the Hulk, and instead of smashing and hitting, he's dashing and quitting. He wants nothing to do with the team. So Rick Jones is sent to look for the Green Goliath, but he ends up up being held hostage, where Tony Stark has to now come to the rescue. Now they make it back to the mansion, but Namor and Hulk want more. They challenge Earth's mightiest to the fight for their lives. Now Iron Man makes suits for Hank, Jan, and Rick, but they can't control the suits. It's too much for them, so they stay in retirement. So Stark powers up his own suit to the max, and then some more, so it's a lot of power going on, almost unobtainable. But then when the rest of the team finally do show up to the battle in Stark's other suits, Hank takes a hard hit. So Tony has to then transfer his suit's energy, that fat energy, in order to keep Hank alive. So even in this what if, Tony still throws his life down for others. How sweet.
You. Yes, you. In this issue of What If, the question is posed, what if you were Spider-Man? They start with a panel of Spider-Man swinging Mary Jane to safety, and they even encourage you to paste a picture of your own face over Spider-Man's to make it even more immersive. But moving forward, this issue doesn't really take much time to explore that question before absolutely roasting you beyond words. The very next panel shows a big group of all of Spider-Man's villains standing in a graveyard, pointing and laughing at a gravestone that reads, "Here lies, fill in your name here," and in big bold letters says, "You'd be dead, you're no superhero." So mean, but also very funny. I thought this was a great one to include because as much as Marvel is known for their meta commentary, this is just on a whole different level.
Number 3. What if the Punisher killed Daredevil? We all know the Punisher as the guy who usually brutally kills criminals. See, with superheroes, those guys he likes to hit with a tranquilizer. But in this what if, we see Daredevil get hit with one of those tranq darts and fall off a building. So while Kingpin prepared for his next step now that he's out of the way, Spider-Man stepped in to deliver some justice on Frank Castle. So he finds the Punisher, and Punisher has no tranq darts left. So he shoots Spider-Man in the shoulder. It's messy, but not fatal, he says. He should survive unless he exerts himself, which he does. And his identity is then revealed. Then it cuts to Aunt May's house, and she grabs a paper, reads the shocking headline, and then the house explodes from a missile launched from the Silvermane City. Boom, house gone. And then after a little while, Peter shows up in a hospital gown, ready to get some revenge on Frank. Peter does pretty well in the fight, so well he's actually just moments away from throwing the Punisher off of a building to his death. But the Punisher stalls and says he has info about his Aunt May, and this slows Peter down for just a split second, allowing for the Punisher to unload on Peter. God, imagine if they introduced Frank Castle in the MCU and then they immediately did something like this.
Stan Lee and the original Marvel bullpen as the Fantastic Four. Naturally, this issue poses the question, what if the original Marvel bullpen had become the Fantastic Four? And what we see is a version of Mr. Fantastic with the likeness of Stan Lee, which is just so fun and bizarre. Jack Kirby, Flo Steinberg, and Saul Brodsky also appear as the other three, and they have themselves a fun, very original adventure as the popular titular heroes. Unfortunately, this issue apparently has some pretty sexist overtones, mostly aimed at Steinberg, which makes the Marvel creators come off as sort of unlikable, especially by today's standards. But regardless, it's a lot of fun to see the people behind the scenes of many of our favorite comics in the forefront of this unique issue of What If.
Number 1, Sheep Boy. When it comes to characters that really stick out to me in the world of Marvel What If, I gotta say a lot of them come from the funny little bits of the comics that aren't even full issues. Because come on, they're so wonderfully ridiculous. One such example at one such point, I guess, is the notorious Sheep Boy. Sheep Boy made his first appearance in What If issue 100. He was created by Jim Chung and is the reimagined version of Spider-Man. Basically, what if Peter Parker had been bit by a radioactive sheep instead? What would we get? Sheep Boy, which would really make for an interesting clone saga when it comes to figuring out the cloning process. Because, aren't we like all about sheeps when it comes to cloning? Actually, I think that through cloning sheep, we actually learned that cloning humans would be ill-advised. So maybe there'd be no more clones in the Marvel Universe if it started with sheep. No more clone sagas after that. I don't know if that would be good or bad. Depends on how much you like or dislike clones, I guess.
Kicking off the list at number 10, what if the Fantastic Four had not gained their superpowers? Okay, the Fantastic Four, the FF, they got their powers when they were on a space mission, and all of a sudden cosmic radiation entered the chat. Powers were given to them all at the same time, each obtaining a hint of the elements. But what if this space mission didn't go south? What if that cosmic storm didn't get past the spaceship's shielding? Well, afterwards, the Rocket Group, that's what they're called after, becomes the highest ranking space industry, so even without powers, they're still awesome. But when Mole Man's monsters come along to attack, the team still comes out on top because science always wins. And before we continue on with this list, if you want to go ahead and give this video a thumbs up, that would be so great. It helps the channel out a lot. Or if you want to hit subscribe, our faces will pop up on your feed. How lovely is that? Number 9. What if Spider-Man had rescued Gwen Stacy? Yes, okay, I remember sitting in the theater watching The Amazing Spider-Man 2, which is so underrated as a movie. Side note, it gets way too much for some reason. But when Gwen was falling in the clock tower, I held my breath. I knew what was gonna happen, and to this day, it's one of the saddest scenes in a comic book film. So this what if certainly helped ease that pain. Issue 24 shows us a world where he caught Gwen, and after that, it's beautiful. He proposes, he reveals his identity to her, and on top of that, Harry and Norman reunite. They work it out. All of the wins, look at this. And then when Peter and Gwen do get married at the ceremony, they're doing the cha-cha slide, which I personally love doing. But then J. Jonah Jameson bursts in with a bunch of police officers with footage that reveals Peter Parker as Spider-Man. So at this point, Peter was forced to run for the rest of his life to protect the ones that he loved. I had you in the first half. I know I did. These what ifs are mostly sad. Number 8. What if the Phoenix had not died? Issue 27 of What If again shows us a brighter future. Well, at least it starts that way. In this alternate reality, Jean didn't die. She was actually reborn again, and then when the X-Men have to take on Galactus and Terrax in the Shi'ar Galaxy, she uses that Phoenix Force to get the job done. She puts an end to Galactus, which sounds great on paper, but the Phoenix Force starts to amplify and get a little bit more and more out of control. So she accidentally destroyed a small star and other asteroids, and when she returns to the X-Mansion, she's now in hot water for destroying yet another star. Shadowcat is not pleased, so Jean turns into the Dark Phoenix and takes out Shadowcat, and Polaris, and Cyclops, and also planet Earth, and then shortly after consumes the universe. That escalated quickly, wow.
Number 7. Joshua Guthrie and Unit Jim 211131. This is actually a pretty sad story, but one that is also kind of silly. It's basically reminiscent of the Iron Giant. Remember the Iron Giant? Remember all the tears that we cried? Except instead of any old giant robot, we have a Sentinel. Unit Jim 211131. This Sentinel is found by Josh Guthrie, little sibling to Husk and Cannonball, who never has his mutant powers manifest. In this world anyways. On our 616, Josh ends up getting wings and musical mutant abilities, going by the codename Icarus. Here, however, he just gets a Sentinel, who has broken programming and instead believes his prime directive is basically to protect and serve Josh. However, he still remembers that mutants are a threat, and when he meets Paige and Sam Guthrie, ends up battling against them, while painted up like an X-Men. Josh's idea, because he wanted to prove that he and his robot were basically a better team than the X-Men ever could be. Oh boy. Paige and Sam end up beaten by the Sentinel, but just as it's about to terminate the defeated mutants, oh no! Josh steps in to protect his siblings. He says that the Sentinel can't kill them without killing him as well. As such, the robot realizes it is the main threat to Josh and decides to terminate itself instead in order to protect him, because that's its prime directive at this point. Sure, Sentinels are kind of villains, but in this story, in a roundabout way, Unit Jim 211131 is actually kind of the hero. Although he threatens Paige and Sam and Josh, he also ends up saving them from himself. I don't know why I made the Sentinel a he, but the Sentinel's a he now, because I'm not going to go back. I gave the Sentinel a gender, I hope that's okay. Josh mourns the loss of his robo friend, and it is ultra sad. Just like Iron Giant.
Number 6. What if the Beast and the Thing continued to mutate? Volume 1, Issue 37. When the Thing is being mutated from Virus X in the normal timeline, Captain America tells him about MODOK's base, but in this tale, the Thing takes off before he gets a chance to do so. So Captain America and Giant Man raid MODOK's base on their own, then they get the antidote that Bill can now use to cure his cancer. Ben reaches this point when he's evolving, and he ends up releasing all of this cosmic energy that 1. Cured himself of Virus X, and 2. Cured Alicia's blindness. Double win. Yes. Grimm is happy with the family, and the newly cured Giant Man takes Ben's spot on the Fantastic Four. It's good. This is a good one. We got one. Nice. Number 5. What if the Avengers had never been? Written by Jim Shooter and Gil Kane, released in 1977, this was actually the first What If issue with a major death. So of course it has to be on the list somewhere. So we start off with the Hulk. Now this time he's not hitting, he's actually quitting. Now this caused the Avengers to dismantle. So Stark asked Rick Jones to find the Hulk, Thor went back to Asgard, and Jan and Hank went back to living as normal people. So Rick finds him, but he's now being held hostage from the Green Giant. So Stark swoops in and saves him, and they head back to the Avengers mansion. So Namor and the Hulk call out the Avengers, or rather what's left of them. So Iron Man makes a few iron suits for the others, and the suits, I mean, They aren't Tony Stark. They can't control these things nearly as well as he can. Unless you're in the movie Iron Man 3, then everyone can do that all of a sudden. So they stay in retirement. They're like, screw that, I don't want any part of that. So he's like, whatever. He powers up his own suit a little bit too much, and then he heads to the battle alone. He fights a bit, and then right when he's about to be ended, the rest show up. Jan, Hank, and Rick are back. Nice. So Tony is done at this point. His armor is weak, he's close to being finished off, so he uses his remaining power to regenerate Hank's armor. So the Hulk snaps out of it and goes after Namor, while the rest of our heroes mourn over a fallen Tony Stark, who sacrificed himself to save his team. Similar vibes to Endgame. A lot of feels in that one, okay? A lot of feels. A good number 5 feels train. Number 4, what if Professor X had become the Juggernaut? In this reality, Professor X is the one who becomes Juggernaut and gets buried in the Temple of Sidorak. Now this caused him to go down a completely different path when it comes to the X-Men, because after this, well, he never created the X-Men, so now the Fantastic Four has to go against Magneto. So after Professor X Juggernaut head digs his way out, he discovers his telepathy was now much stronger with the added powers. What a treat. I mean, not really. He ends up taking over the country with his own X-Men posse to enforce these anti-human laws. Cyclops even sides with Magneto at this point because he's like, okay, at least this guy can block Xavier's telepathy. And it all comes down to this final confrontation with Cyclops and Xavier. They're battling it out on Asteroid M, and Cyclops is trying to remind Xavier about the vision, the original dream, with humans and mutants living together in perfect harmony. Doesn't that sound lovely? And then before he could really consider it, the ground beneath him exploded and he got launched into space forever. Oof!
Number 3, Galen. Galactus may be better known as a villain in the Marvel Universe, the main Marvel Universe, or at least a powerful antagonist, if you will. But in the what if reality of Earth 92201, he's actually better known for being a sort of everyday hero, if you will. When Galen as Galactus ends up in battle against Thanos, who wields the Infinity Gauntlet, he ends up defeated, being transformed into an amnesiac human left on planet Earth. When found, it just so happens that Galen's voice and appearance greatly resembled that of a young Elvis. People believed he was Elvis returned, positing that Elvis never really died. Galen even ends up believing he is Elvis and finds happiness on Earth with a woman named Gertrude and her son Tony. Warlock finds Galen and offers to turn him back into his form of Galactus, but Galen is actually so happy he chooses to remain on Earth and continue living as Earth's Elvis replacement, basically. It's a great story.
Number 2, what if Spider-Man joined the Fantastic Four? Okay, with John Watts directing the newest Spider-Man trilogy for the MCU and the upcoming MCU Fantastic Four reboot, this next what if might not seem that impossible. The first ever issue of What If finds Pete with a number 5 on his chest. The Fantastic Five has a ring to it. I kind of love the idea already. So Pete was low on cash, so he figured, you know what, I'm gonna break into the Baxter building and straight up force an audition for Marvel's first family. So Sue recruits Peter and the team is formidable. They're great, they're solid. They're so good that Sue doesn't even feel like there's a need for her on the team anymore. There's always something sad. Don't do it, Sue. She ends up choosing Namor as her other half, even joining him in his kingdom under the sea. Now she did love Reed as well, but her departure from the team just made it work better with a fishy guy. Now if you want to see more of that altered storyline, because it is quite intriguing, jump ahead 20 issues once you're done this epic kickoff. And finally, coming in at number 1, what if somebody else besides Spider-Man had been bitten by the radioactive spider? This is perhaps one of my favorite what ifs because I genuinely have thought about what would happen if I was Spider-Man. I work for Top 10 Nerd, of course I'm going to daydream about this. Thing is though, I'm afraid of heights, so it wouldn't exactly be smooth sailing. But I can dream, right? Even in the Marvel Universe, other big names can't handle the webs. In this what if, we see Flash Thompson, Betty Brant, and John Jameson each get a swing at the sticky life. So Flash gets bit and then he decides to take a crack at professional wrestling with the new muscles and all. Now he may have underestimated his strength because he kind of accidentally killed the guy. You should have tapped. Oops. Next up, Betty Brant gets bit, and I have to admit her costume is for sure the most stylish. Very good, makes for great Instagram posts, sure. But when she runs out of web fluid making TikToks, the thief who took Uncle Ben's life was easily able to get away. She was like... And finally we see John Jameson's turn, and he goes out like a hero. He tries to stop a space shuttle from crashing, and it's a lot harder than it looks. If you're not Pete, just don't even try, honestly. Kicking off the list with number 10, what if the Juggernaut? Okay, to start this sad list, we got What If starring the Juggernaut. It was released in 1997, written by George Gonzalez, and we kick off in a world where Sentinels have already wiped out all superheroes. Great start. Plus there's this toxic gas that's filling up the atmosphere, which will kill all of life. So things are beginning grim right off the bat, okay. And all that's left now at this point is just the Juggernaut. Now he's hunting down these Sentinels. He wants to die, but his own invulnerability won't let that happen. Kind of like Hulk the End, just a sad, strong man in a world full of rubble. So he sees Iron Man's helmet, he sees Cyclops' cracked visor. He's just walking down horrible memory lane. Then he meets a couple of surviving mutants and they're not in good condition, mentally, I mean. They're actually blaming Juggernaut for killing the X-Men, and it all ends with Juggernaut knowing he's going to be the last living being on the planet and that it's his own damn fault. And before we go on to number 9 for our next sad what if story, if you guys could go ahead and please like this video, or else we'll be on a what if you didn't like the video, and then it's gonna be a sad video on all the alternate futures where you didn't like our videos. So please go ahead and do that, because that would be great. You guys are the best, thank you so much. Now back to the list. Number 9, what if Cable had destroyed the X-Men? Well, this one just sounds bad right off the hop. So after Professor X came back to Earth, the team was never going to be the same again. At this X-Men meeting, Xavier gets in a fight with Cable, and then all of a sudden it turns into Cable and his crew versus everybody, and it was just this big brawl. Now they escape, but later on, Cable kills Xavier, Jean, and Scott with a siren bomb. So now everybody's deciding on what to do with this guy. Wolverine's team wanted to kill him, and Storm's team wanted to bring him in. Both are pretty bad. So the Avengers have to step in and fight their battles while they're all working their own stuff out over there. So the Avengers are like, just do your thing, we're gonna go fight your bad guys, just wrap it up. But eventually Cable and his team is killed by Wolverine's team. Number 8, what if Wolverine battled Conan the Barbarian? Written by Glenn Herdling and released in 1990, what if Wolverine had battled Conan the Barbarian? So basically Conan and Wolverine switch dimensions. So we have Wolverine causing trouble in the Hyborian Age alongside Red Sonja, and Conan smashes Cyclops in the head with a rock, which causes the full fury of the Phoenix Force to be unleashed. So now this has caused a ripple effect, so the psychic rapport was shattered, and without Wolverine to hurl Colossus at her, there's nothing that prevents Jean Grey from transforming into her dark persona before she can destroy herself, resulting in the destruction of the entire universe. So just like that, Cyclops gets hit with a rock and then it all goes to shit. So yeah, crossovers are for sure fun, but you gotta look at the possible ways it could go poorly as well. Wolverine versus Conan the Barbarian is definitely one of those ways. Number 7, what if the Punisher was a hall monitor? Dipping into a more comedic side of things, because the last two were just straight tragic, the Punisher as a hall monitor. Short and sweet, and it couldn't get any better. He's watching the halls in a quiet, generic grade school in a typical town in USA. You can find this in volume 2, issue 34. It's pretty intense. I mean, it goes for the comedic take, but Frank Castle being Frank Castle in front of any children, that's a nightmare. They thought they were off the hook at the beginning of the issue. The kids reiterate the fact that the Hulk is no longer watching these halls, so they're fine. So once the Punisher sends them to the principal's office after getting caught, the last panel we see is the Hulk in the principal's chair now. It's a short one, but the idea is actually terrifying and hilarious all at the same time. Poor kids. I thought my principal was scary. I thought Mr. Hubert was scary. No, the Hulk is a bit more scary. A bit, just a little bit. Number 6, what if the Hulk died and Kyra lived? Written by Greg Pak, released in 2007. Okay, so we start with the Hulk saving Kyra by throwing her out of the way of the explosion instead of the ship. So now the Hulk had died along with Crown City. And Kyra, she's pretty pissed, right? She takes all the old power from the planet and gets ready with her sights set on Earth. She's coming. First stop, of course, being the moon, where she defeats Black Bolt and then implants a obedience disc on him. So when Strange and Sentry come to the rescue, she makes Black Bolt use his sonic scream, which of course results in both of them dying. She's killing everybody fast, okay? So Heroim comes to stop her and says that basically if you kill everybody on Earth, nobody can honor your dead husband. So she says, fine, but you're gonna wish you were dead instead. And then it cuts to 21 years later and she's made all the remaining heroes build this massive Hulk statue. And when it's finally done, she walks onto the hand of the statue and then turns into stone, joining him. The end. Yeah, how sad is that? I mean, I feel like it wouldn't take those guys 21 years to build a statue. I mean, if they're getting paid by the hour, sure, then by all means, go for it.
Number 5, actual Black Widow. Black Widow in issue 34 of What If gets her own little mini comic taking up a third of a page. It's really kind of like just a panel. It answers the question, what if Spider-Man had married the Black Widow? Well, it wouldn't end well apparently. The joke is based on what Black Widows are known to do to their mates in nature. Female Black Widows, that is. In nature, they eat their mates, hence why in this comic, Spider-Man doesn't fare too well. The implication is that Black Widow actually eats Peter here. We see her picking her teeth, looking quite content and burping, while behind her Spider-Man's suit looks pretty deflated with bones poking out of it and littered around it. So yeah.
Number 4. What if somebody else besides Spider-Man had been bitten by the radioactive spider? Written by Don Glut, released in 1977, we get to see a dream play out. Look, we've all probably wanted to be Spider-Man at one point or another. Of course, I mean, doing backflips and swinging downtown, that's gotta be the vibe. But of course, when it comes to stopping criminals and taking out supervillains, it's probably pretty stressful. So in this What If, we get to see this idea play out. We see other characters have a crack at the life of the web slinger, starting with Flash Thompson. And let's just say it's a lot harder than it looks. So we got Flash Thompson. Now after he gets bit, he teaches a bad driver a lesson, and he feels pretty good with his new given abilities, and he plays it out a bit. So he decides to take a crack at professional wrestling, maybe make some cash, which is a pretty good idea. I mean, you're a superhero, so you can definitely win most, if not all, fights. But he accidentally kills the guy. Sorry, oops. Then Betty Brant is now up with the powers. Okay, so let's see how she would do in the life. Well, her costume for starters is pretty badass. But when she runs out of web fluid while making TikToks, a thief runs by and gets away. And that thief, of course, being the one to take Uncle Ben's life. So far, so bad. Now finally, we have our third contender with the powers. John Jameson. While his outfit was also pretty good, he couldn't do the job like Peter, and he actually died while trying to prevent a space shuttle from crashing. I guess it's not as easy as it looks. I mean, to be fair, if something actually happened and it had webs, I really wouldn't know what to do. I would do a backflip and be like, is it fixed? No? It was cool though. Number 3, what if Loki had found the hammer of Thor? The final issue of Volume 1 of What If, again, something we're kind of close to seeing in the MCU, especially with Loki Season 2 being confirmed. These timelines are about to be really enjoyable, and we might get a hint of this, I think. So Donald Blake ends up not finding the hammer because Loki tossed it into the woods, and then the Saturnians wiped out Donald. So Thor wakes up in the land of the dead, memory not included. This is all bad for Thor. It's not so much Loki using the hammer, he just alters the hammer's location, and then Thor's altered future is now a stressful one. Number 2, what if Kraven the Hunter had killed Spider-Man? Released in 1990, written by Richard Howell. Yeah, judging by this title alone, this one's a little sad. I figured we're already on the Spider-Man misfortune train, so I had to throw this one in next, you know? What if Kraven had killed Spider-Man? Okay, so we start with Pete patrolling the streets when he's suddenly trapped by Kraven in a net, and just like that, he unloads, killing Peter Parker. And of course, he eats a bunch of spiders and suits up himself to celebrate. Yeah, you eat a bunch of spiders, now you're Spider-Man. That's how it works. I think a human eats like, what, 7 spiders in a year when they're sleeping? So we have like, what, 7,000 to go? So now he's Spider-Man, just like that, cool. Meanwhile, MJ is like, where on earth is that Peter Parker guy? And then MJ is approached by a couple of thugs, and then in comes Spider-Man to save her. Only it's Kraven, but she doesn't know that. But she can tell something's up because Spider-Man doesn't recognize her, and he's way more brutal with taking out these thugs. So Cap, Daredevil, and Human Torch jump in to see what's up with the wall crawler. They did a decent job of wearing down the beast, but he needed more power. He ate a bunch of spiders earlier, so now it's only fair if he tries to eat Spider-Man's dead body, right? Comics are weird. So MJ tells Cap and the gang that Spider-Man is actually Peter Parker, and that the Spider-Man is indeed not the same. And then Aunt May goes into denial hearing about the news. She's messed up now for life. And the media isn't happy with the tension between supers and the public. The story ends with MJ standing at Peter's funeral, wondering how things could have been. God, Peter just can't catch a break, eh? Oh my God. And finally, number 1, the saddest of them all, what if Wolverine father? Written by Rob Williams, released in 2011, we start off with Wolverine taking out the Winter Soldier. And we see a world with Wolverine and Daken if they had spent their life growing together as father and son. So now we get to see what it would have been like if Logan was there for them the whole time. Now in this reality, they're named John. This life, however, was filled with repression and lies and led to John leaving his home and rising up as Daken, becoming the leader of the Japanese underworld. So Wolverine tried to save him, but because of the way he was raised with this version of Logan, he looked at him like a monster. He viewed himself as a monster too. This is the Muramasa blade, John, says Logan as he stabs him. Healing factors don't work on it. The issue ends with the boy dying beside his father, and Logan uses the same blade on himself. And that's the end. That's the end of the comic. Everyone dies, everyone's sad. That's what ifs for you, right there.